Brought to you by Knights of Awakening. This is the Labyrinth.
I am your host, Charles, and we are back. The Labyrinth has returned. Normally, I would take an opportunity like this to go over more of what's been going on in my life and the things that have happened to bring me to where I'm at, and the Return of the Labyrinth and why now is such a good time for the Return of the Labyrinth. But, you know me, I like a good rolling start instead. So what we're going to do is our first return episode is not going to go over what I've went through. That'll be the next episode coming up. Next episode will cover, how I went from Maryland to Florida and the really Herculean effort it took to get me here and what I've been doing since then. Today's episode is going to cover a bit more of the mystical, because the Labyrinth has always been about the mystical. And we're going to continue to be that. I have a passion for it. I love magic. I love mysticism. You're never going to get me away from it. A buddy of mine once said, you're a Norseman, but you're a mystic before you're anything else. And you know what? He's right. I will always be a mystic. I will always be a Norseman as well. But mysticism is true and near and dear to my heart, and it flows through my blood. So with that, today we are doing a bit of a skit on Dracula versus the vampires, and we're going to have ourselves a little guest star who's going to be coming in here, and he's going to be discussing some things with us. And I think you all know him. Everyone, a round of applause for Dracula.
Thank you all. No, please, this is far too much. Thank you. Please, control yourself, people. Thank you. It is so very good to be here. I flew all the way in from Transylvania, and my arms are tired. But, no fun? Oh, not even... Oh, very well. I will give you back to the host, and he shall continue to speak to you about the differences between those who are like me and then the other vampires you may come across.
Well, thank you, Dracula. So he'll be here. He'll be helping with commentary. He'll be explaining various things to us, and Dracula has he has some issues with controlling his language. Here on the Labyrinth, we've always prided ourselves on our language. I mean, you've only ever heard me drop the F-bomb maybe 100 times and things like that. We really want to hold to that standard. So if at any point Dracula gets out of hand, I'm going to bleep him out. He can be a very vulgar fellow, and we're going to make sure to keep that under control for this episode. And, we're going to keep an eye on things. So I guess the very first thing, Dracula, could you tell us about the legacies of the vampires that you've come across in your time, and what you would define as a real vampire, and then I'll give my take on it.
Yes, well, true vampires. They come from a descendant of my line. They have my blood within their veins, and it is very easy to tell a true vampire from other vampires. We do not like the sun, and we must feed. We must suck your.
Whoa there, Dracula. Whoa. We went over this, at the start of the show. I want you to try to rein yourself in there. I mean, we understand, you have your needs, but you gotta rein it in on the profanities.
What profanities? I just very much I need to suck your. I have to suck. It is necessary for my life that I must suck.
All right, fine. We get it. You got to do this. It's part of what you do. We understand. I guess then I'll refute this a bit. My knowledge of vampires, and I know a few real traditional vampires who've done the study, the research, and the training within vampiric orders. is that there are a number of different legacies. Not everyone hails from the Dark Lord Dracula over here. In fact, almost no one does. Very few people are natural vampires in the truest sense, and those that are probably frowned upon by the greater vampiric community for a lack of skill and knowledge. Now, that isn't to say there aren't rituals and traditions, and I think we'll go back to Dracula and give his view on what it means to be a vampire, since he is the Lord of the Vampires. He understands this better than we do. What would you say? What accoutrements of action are part of being a vampire?
I'm very glad you asked that. To be a vampire, one must wear all dark clothes, and they must never venture into the sunlight, and of course we must suck and things of that nature. We must make certain to wear the best black clothing. We must dress in the dark clothing and wear very white makeup if your skin is all very dark. We must wear the white makeup to help. The modern day vampire must wear the dark clothes and the chains, and we must have the jewelry and such to fit in with the traditional people, so they will know that we are vampires.
Oh wow, okay. There's some dogma, I would say, from what little research I've been able to do. There's some dogma to all vampiric groups. Oftentimes things more relating to how to stave off the energetic hunger, the natural need for energy that a true vampire has. And they'll often do things like drinking chocolate milk or orange juice or something like that, something very high caloric, high sugar content to help with this, because it gives that energetic boost, through the body system. But my experience is that other than being well dressed, choosing a suit or tie as a primary means of expression, most vampires don't adhere to that part of the dogma. They have their own dogma. They have their own rituals. Many will take certain types of communion or masses or things of that nature to aid in their progress, which I guess is where we kind of start getting into some of the fantasy versus some of the reality. What would you say, Dracula, that the biggest misconception of vampires is?
I would have to say the biggest misconception of my people is that we are like everyone else, that we can relate to everyone else, that in some way we are normal, that we are part of the normal collective. This is not true. A true vampire is separate from the world. We do not fit in. We are scorned wherever we go. We are the hated. We are terrible. And all because we want to suck.
Wow, that's a thing, I'll offer mine here. So we have a list of questions that myself and Dracula have went over, and we discussed this earlier. That's why we're going through this. And for fantasy versus reality, I have found that the biggest difference between the fantasy and the reality of vampires is that real vampires do look like everyone else. My experience has been that your vampire, it's hard to tell. I mean, you can sometimes sense them, especially if you're as mystically inclined as myself is. But if you're not of that mystical inclination, if you don't have that knowledge and that skill, you will probably never know a vampire to meet with them, other than that they will be very well dressed. I have a good friend who's a vampire, and he may be the most diurnal vampire on earth. He thrives off a normal sleep cycle. He hates being awake late at night for too long. He is good for being in the sunlight. He's yet to burst into flames in my experience. Just overall, the biggest misconception between the fantasy and the reality is the need for blood. The need for that. And I'm going to get into that, a little bit later. But my experience, most vampires are not wearing, funny clothes, and they're not outcast. If anything, they're going to be the most respectable person you know. But I thought we would get into a little bit of the mysticism side of this, if we could, Dracula, the vampires who hail from your style of vampirism. If you could, what would you say for the methods of mysticism that you employ?
We gain our power from our heritage. We gain our power from the deep connection to blood. We gain our power from the essence of the life force that we steal from others, that we take forcefully, with the great vengeance and the great hunger. Our power comes from the animalistic, from the cruel.
Well, no doubt that a true vampire's power does come from the animalistic. It does come from primal forces, and oftentimes vampiric seals and letters. And as to, how far back these things date, they're probably a fairly modern invention, inspired by the works of the Goetia and by various traditions such as Enochian high magic and things like that. I'm sure that a lot of vampiric seals are inspired by those. Some of them may be inspired by more Luciferian practices and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, my experience has been that most vampires gain their power through deep ritual, deep ceremony, incredible focus on their art and on what they are, what they really and truly are. So, I'll have to disagree yet again with Dracula on this. Ritual mysticism is where most vampires get their abilities, or through deep meditation. Most of them don't get it through the feeding so much, but they do gain a lot more oomph from what they do with feeding on energy. And we're going to get into that next. Dracula, we know that, vampires in your sect like to feed on, well, maybe not energy, but what would you say that they do with what it is that they're taking in?
The sustains us and gives us great power. We take it in to maintain our life force energy. Without it, we would die. It is necessary, and with sufficient amounts, some such as I may walk in the light.
Well, that is definitely a thing, Mr. Dracula. So I guess what I'll hit on then is that most of your vampires are not just stealing energy. Most of them are not using it to live off of either. The psychic vampire uses energy and compresses it for their own purposes, usually having to do with something with ascension. And they generally make people healthier when they feed on them. They feed on the excess energies and the negative energies and the overloads of life force energies that are causing the health problems and health issues. They feed off of the energies in chakras where the chakra is in a state of overload, or if no chakras are in a state of overload, they may feed on the other chakras to lower them to the lowest chakra point, which will actually balance the chakra and still be more beneficial than leaving the person in a state of decay. So, as a rule, and this is just my experience, me and Dracula aside, who's to say the truth, but as a rule, from what I've seen, real vampires try to make use of the energy in a way that's beneficial for their target. Would you like to refute that at all, Dracula?
Yes, when we feed, we leave a mark on their neck with our
that's a thing. The transmutation of energies in traditional vampiristic methods that are common in the United States and England work more towards ascension, which has to do with the compression of those energies in such a way as to extend their life force either after death or during life, so as to make the vampire healthier, stronger, better. This is comparative to Qi condensation and Qigong methods, specifically hard Qigong. And my experience has been that it's been very effective. It's a lot better than leaving marks on people's necks with, whatever. Some vampires do have fangs. Some vampires treat that as a symbol, the mythos, the dogma that we discussed earlier. So it's not that they don't have fangs, it's they don't wear their fake fangs everywhere. Very few get transplanted teeth because very few are that worried about the look. Most are more worried about the truth. And that's as real vampires. I'm going to get into this, and then I'm going to let Dracula have it. The hunger is not a need. You know, the hunger is not something that a vampire has all the time. It's not something they need and must fulfill.
No, no, you're wrong, you're wrong. The hunger is a need, it must be fulfilled. They must feed, they must feed. It is quintessential to what a vampire is. You could sum up a vampire as one that must feed, and that is what we are. We must feed on.
Real vampires do not need to feed on anything. A real vampire feeds on energy to ascend, to strengthen themselves, to grow better in some fashion. They don't need it. Someone who needs to feed like that is a parasite. And there's a big difference in the vampire community. You know, a real vampire feeds on energy to become stronger, to become better, to become something. They're using the excess energies of other people's life force energy, or they're working with a willing donor of energy to strengthen themselves psychically. Real vampires in real mystical communities, and we're not talking parasites, we're talking about the reputable. They don't just rip energy from other people. They're not some sucker. They are reputable, focused energy workers with their own skill set. They are capable. There's a big difference. Parasites drain people's energy all the way down to their core energy levels. They leave people weakened. They leave them hurt. They leave them in a bad position energetically, and a true vampire knows better. They know that leaves them open. It leaves them open to people like me who I hate to tell you, and I'm sorry. I was kind of saving this, you know, but I'm not a vampire hunter, but I am a Dracula hunter.
You fiend, you've drawn me here on false pretenses here. I thought I was here to suck your but in reality I am here, so you could trick me and trap me. This has all been a setup from the start. You've lured me here.
Yeah, you got me, Drac. This has been one big effort to show the mystical community what real vampires are versus the misconceptions, and we're going to finish this off with, you know, I'm going to explain to people. You know, since we've got you here, since you're not leaving, since it's still daylight out, we know you're not going out in the sunlight. The difference between real vampires and fake vampires and parasites. A real vampire draws in energy, the effort to ascend, to better themselves in some way. They don't do it for the buzz, and they don't do it just for the fun of it. You know, that's just a normal human being who has learned vampirism, who's drawing in energy for the feel. A real vampire has a purpose to it. They usually have a lineage, a heritage. They do it in such a way so that they don't harm or cause severe harm. Though they have the ability to, and it's a combat technique, it's not beyond them to drain a target dry. It's something they reserve for a fight, the same way as a true mystic doesn't use curses willy-nilly. We save them for times when they are of value or when there's a good purpose to them. You know, Drac, if you have any last words as I prepare the mighty rifle of Bane.
Yes, I do. You cannot ever truly defeat me. Wherever there is a young child wearing gothic clothing, wherever there is someone speaking with a bad accent, wherever there is one vampire who wants to suck there I will be, in the shadows of the recesses of the mind. For whenever someone watches a vampire movie and buys into the idea, whenever someone looks at the idea presented within media of the man wearing the bellhop's uniform, wearing the suit that looks like this, then there will I be. So even you cannot kill me, for I will always be here in the subconscious mind of the people who believe in Dracula.
Yeah, I know you will be, and there's no getting rid of you at the end of the day. There will always be Draculas, and there will always be real vampires, and for those in the mystical community who have never met a real vampire, who don't know what one is, I pity you if all you've met is Draculas. You have not met a person from a rich culture and a background and an ideal of energy work that is different yet interrelated to a lot of what we've seen in what might be considered more reputable energetic communities. So sadly, if you've only been exposed to this, I feel bad for you. But I am going to do you one good favor.
Haha, you fool. Bullets cannot kill me. Only silver bullets and a stake through the
You know, that's one more. Before we end this, there's this myth that vampires are physically invulnerable and all this other happy horse crap, that they are bulletproof. And, you know, I found that cutting anyone's head off usually kills them, and a bullet through even more than the heart will do a good job. You don't need silver bullets or a stake to kill a vampire. They're mortal as you and I, so please don't shoot your friends if they say they're a vampire to prove it. But in this case, to kill a Dracula, there's only one good way to do that. Thank you all. It's been a pleasure. As always, awaken the night within.